And a very big thank you to the RRG Group, who are my latest sponsor and will be throughout the season, going home and away all over Europe, the FA Cup, of course the Carabao Cup as well, and in the Premier League. Thanks for your support, guys.
Well, we all know what's happened with Manchester City just of late, and on Friday night I recorded a special podcast on the Forever Blue channel, which was 3 City fans and me talking about the immediate reaction to City being banned from the Champions League, of course, for 2 seasons as it stands at the moment. And there was also a video version on the YouTube channel, and here on that YouTube channel is a follow-up video 2 days later with Colin Savage, who's also known as Presswich Blue, who I've always regarded as, certainly in fandom and away from the club, because I'd love to sit down, no offence Colin, with Caldoon or somebody like that to talk about this, but clearly I'm not going to get that type of access. But I know a lot of fans have said to me, oh, I'd love to hear from Colin Savage at the moment and see what his take is on this. So thankfully you've agreed to do this.
I'll get over being second choice eventually.
So tell us what what your take is on this whole situation, the ban and where City stand.
I think we were all a bit staggered really, because the word was, somebody had said, we're not expecting a ban. Omar Barada had said to us at a City Matters meeting just before Christmas that the UEFA president, Alexander Seferin, was trying to negotiate a deal with us, and that if we accepted what he described as a technical breach and a fine, then it would all go away. Now, I think what we've seen is that hasn't gone away. City refused that offer because obviously they did a deal with UEFA back in 2014, and it didn't go away then because it's now come back. And this all relates to that time period. So it's just reopening an old wound, if you like. So, City told UEFA they wouldn't accept any punishment whatsoever. So UEFA have come down on us pretty hard. Now, the interesting thing for me is that there's 2 chambers within UEFA. There's the investigatory chamber, which is like the lower one, the House of Commons, and there's the adjudicatory chamber, which is like the House of Lords. So the investigatory chamber has certain powers, but for a bigger case, it has to pass it up to the adjudicatory chamber. Now, this adjudicatory chamber is not composed of UEFA officials. It's external people. It's lawyers and football administrators from outside UEFA. But obviously, it's under UEFA's banner. Now, it's described as an independent, quasi-independent channel. So they are not UEFA employees or functionaries. They are engaged by UEFA. So the interesting thing is, the case went up to them in, it must have been May 2019, because that was just before the 5-year deadline expired for a statute of limitations. And if Alexander Seferin was touting around a deal, you've got to question how independent that adjudicatory chamber actually is, because the implication is that he can say to them, come on lads, let's go easy on them. Now, that doesn't strike me as being an independent body. So that all is rather funny. So that you do think, was it a trap? Was this offer a trap? City are convinced, of course, they've done nothing wrong. Omar made the point again. We have done nothing wrong.
He's the Chief Operations Manager.
Chief Operating Officer. The story is that we supplied a 200-page dossier of evidence in our defence to the investigatory chamber, but they didn't even look at it, didn't read it, just passed the case and the verdict straight to the adjudicatory chamber. As far as I'm aware, and this was just before Christmas, we were still waiting to hear if we were going to get a chance to present that evidence face to face. So he didn't know what the outcome was going to be. As far as I'm aware, we've not had the chance to speak to the adjudicatory chamber. Now, it's it's not a court of law, but it's a very odd situation. If you went into court, if you were charged with an offence, you went into court, and you can imagine the prosecution making its case at great length, and then it comes to the case for the defence, and your lawyer stands up and the judge says, "I've been got time. Sorry, sit down, jury, I need a decision now." Now, that's an abuse. You'd go straight to appeal on that, of course.
So the critics who are saying that UEFA are judge, jury and executioner are right, and you just illustrated
that,
really.
Yes, that's certainly right in this case.
So how does it work now if this goes to a neutral body, which is what City intends to do? First of all, what do you think the chances are that they'll get this overturned? And what is the time scale? I mean, a city likely to have next year's ban suspended and still compete? How are the women affected? because they're in the Women's Champions League. And obviously, I'm not going to ask you about whether anybody's going to leave, because none of us know that. So let's just talk about that.
Well, the easy one, the women are not affected. This only affects the men's team. The women is a separate entity, no issue with them. So where does it go now? It goes to the Court for Arbitration in Sport. And although it's got the title court, it's not a court as such. It's a mediation body. So they will hear both sides of the argument and they will decide. And basically, they're
How
not
quickly
looking at,
will that happen?
we don't know. There's a couple of possibilities. One is they could fast track it. So there's a precedent for them fast tracking these cases. If there's a sporting competition coming up and our involvement in it might be impacted by them taking too long over a decision. The question is, how long would they take to make that? And it took them from, I can't remember, when did we make that appeal to CAS? I don't know, earlier in the year, sometime last year, maybe even in the summer, and they've only just released their official findings now. So it's a question of how quickly could we do that. So there is a precedent for hearing a case quickly, because they've done it before, frankly, in some of the drug cases where an athlete might be denied the opportunity to compete in the Olympics.
What's your feeling on whether or not City will win, if that's the expression?
Well, City seem quite confident that CAS are not going to judge on the legality or otherwise of financial fair play. So let's kind of put that to one side. CAS have a very narrow remit in some ways. They're not a court. Basically, they're looking at UEFA's process and procedures. We will complain there has been abuse of process. We've already complained to them about that. We've thrown a marker down. And they actually came back saying some of the UEFA leaks were, in their words, worrisome. So they've already passed comment on the way UEFA conducted their business. The question is, did UEFA abuse its process? So in the rush to meet this 5-year statute of limitations, did they set aside the rules of natural justice?
This is very interesting, because obviously my biggest complaint about this whole thing, because I'm not an expert like you are and other people on the laws of all this, but my objection is that City have spent their own money, and in principle that feels wrong, but those are UEFA rules. So what you're saying is that cities can't really argue against that, what I'm arguing for. They can only argue about procedures and the way that it's done.
Yes.
So that's a bit more worrisome from a City perspective, isn't it?
Well,
in a way. Because they're not arguing against the principle, they're getting it over.
Well, it's two different matters.
Yeah, well, they are.
So I think UEFA are much more at risk on this abusive process, actually.
Right.
The question is, and some of the press this weekend has been absolutely appalling, frankly. We're really staggering, some of the bile and vitriol.
True.
Some people have basically burned their bridges, I think, with City. So if City get cleared by CAS, and say they won't be making a comment on whether our accounting procedures were correct. It's purely the UEFA procedure, as far as I understand it.
Well, without going into it in any more detail, and I know this is a difficult question to answer from your perspective or mine, because I get it asked all the time. What's your gut feeling, your educated guess as to whether City will get completely exonerated, whether this will be, as some have suggested, reduced from 2 years to 1, or whether this will remain a 2-year ban?
It's difficult to say. I say CAS could throw out UEFA's punishment. I'm not quite sure what their powers are to reduce the ban, whether they can unilaterally do that and say it's only going to be a 1-year ban, or whether they can say to UEFA have to do that. So they could possibly say to UEFA, well, the punishment is too harsh, you need to reduce it.
Right.
They can throw the whole case out completely and say, UEFA's case is completely flawed, they've abused the process, they've not followed proper procedure. They can certainly do that. From what I've seen, you never know when you're going into a court of law.
It's impossible.
I was speaking to a barrister
it?
friend earlier, and he said, you can think you're absolutely 100% certain you're going to win the case, and something will pop up. Particularly when you're dealing with a jury, of course, can be very capricious.
There'll be a jury.
No, there won't be a jury.
Right.
So the way it works actually is there are 3 arbitrators. We pick one from a list. UEFA pick one, and CAS pick one.
Right.
So they could throw the whole thing out. They could say UEFA completely abused that process. They've not given City the chance to explain. Basically, they've not allowed us a case for the defence. Therefore, go away.
What's your gut feeling, Colin?
I'd like to think they would. CAS would say that. The problem is, of course, that doesn't exonerate us, and the mud will still stick. And I think that's what UEFA, or perhaps. And again, we talk about UEFA. UEFA's not like a homogeneous entity. It has a bureaucracy, so it's got Alexander Seferin, the president at the top. It has an executive, but those executives aren't UEFA employees. So David Gill is one of them. He's not UEFA. I'm not sure he's a UEFA employee. He's still a director at United. He's still something to do with the FA, I think, and he's still involved in FIFA, I think, in some way. So he's not a full-time UEFA. He might be. He's treasurer, actually, UEFA. But whether that's a full-time role or not, I don't know. So there's UEFA, and then there's all the clubs that make up UEFA. A bit like the Premier League. The Premier League is not a homogeneous entity composed of 20 clubs that all have different views on things. So, we already know, don't we, that there's a group of clubs at the top of UEFA, the old G14, the cartel, whatever you want to call them, who don't like us. Who see us as the arrivistes, the nouveau riche club who's come to upset their little, nice little cosy party that they used to have. You look at Arsenal, outside the European places completely at the moment, just behind Manchester United in 10th, just crept into the top half with the win this afternoon. And we put their noses out of joint. I mean, Liverpool, of course, are back in the game. United may not be in Europe next season. So you see the big clubs who have consolidated their position. And financial fair play has helped them consolidate that position, because you can't do what Sheikh Mansour did in 2008. Now you can't do what Roman Abramovich did in 2003.
Jack Walker or
Jack
Dave
Walker.
Whelan,
All these people.
History,
you can't do that anymore. So these talks to take over Newcastle, what if these come to fruition? What is the new owner going to be able to do? But in fact, actually, UEFA recognised that was an issue, because they, after the first kind of round of of FFP assessment, they then introduced this ability for an owner to fund clubs for 4 years as long as they were on a path to break even. So what they're accusing us of doing is now quite legal under FFP in many ways. There are certain conditions attached to it, but they're now saying, well, an owner can put in money in. So that may be another ground for us appealing to CAS, actually, to say, well, hang on, UEFA's intention, where they started from, where they are now is a completely different picture. And apparently CAS take quite a lot of notice of where things are now rather than where things were when they started. So the position is that we could say, well, hang on, UEFA have allowed for owner investment under controlled circumstances, which is what we did. So I don't know whether that's a grounds for appeal or whether it's a very narrow. We can just talk about the procedure.
Colin, thanks very much for trying to, at the moment, explain a very complex issue. I hope that's been of some use for you to watch. Obviously, as this story continues to develop, I'll talk to fans, both on the podcast and the vlog. And if you want to react, follow me on social media at Ian Cheeseman, then give me your views as well. Make sure you listen to the podcast as well, which I'm doing with Colin and Andrew and Adam, who are from City Matters Committee. And of course, I'll be at the match on Wednesday against West Ham doing a brand new vlog. And despite what's happening at the moment, the one thing I always say, and I could not mean it more at the moment, is it's always great being a Blue.
And as ever, a very big thank you to Hotclickmarketing, who can get your company to the top of Google searches. So give them a call. And thanks for your support, guys.